What happened to the cast of Expedition X is something nobody saw coming. Jessica Chobot, Phil Torres, and the rest of the team built one of the most daring paranormal investigation franchises on television, chasing the unknown across the world. But behind the cameras, things were falling apart in ways that shocked even their most devoted fans. Before this video is over, you will not believe what happened to Josh Gates. Stay with us. The full story starts right now. Expedition X was not supposed to be just another paranormal show. When it first premiered on Discovery Plus, it felt like something the genre had been waiting years for. A series that combined genuine scientific investigation with the kind of atmosphere and tension that made viewers feel like something real was at stake every single episode. Jessica Chobot and Phil Torres were not ghost hunters in the traditional sense. They were investigators in the truest meaning of the word, traveling to some of the most remote and dangerous locations on the planet in pursuit of answers that most television producers would not have had the courage to chase. The show built a devoted audience quickly, and for good reason. Every investigation felt like it mattered. Every piece of evidence felt like it had been earned rather than staged. Fans who had grown tired of the manufactured drama and scripted reactions that dominated the paranormal space found something in Expedition X that felt genuinely different. This was a show that respected its audience enough to take the mystery seriously. It did not insult viewers with fake jump scares and convenient technical malfunctions designed to fill runtime. It went to the locations, it did the actual work, and it let the evidence speak for itself without dressing it up in artificial tension that the genre had become addicted to. The cast had real chemistry, real curiosity, and a willingness to be genuinely uncomfortable in pursuit of something that might actually change the way people thought about the unexplained. Seasons came and went, and the fan base only grew more devoted. Episode after episode, viewers tuned in not just for the atmosphere, but for the sense that they were watching people who actually believed in what they were doing. That belief was contagious in a way that cannot be manufactured. And then, without warning, without explanation, and without anything resembling a proper goodbye, it was gone. The social media accounts went quiet mid-cycle. The network released no statement of any real substance to the audience that had given the show years of their loyalty. Fans who had been following the series since its earliest episodes were left refreshing pages, checking schedules, and finding nothing but silence where something they loved used to live. The comment sections filled rapidly with confusion, concern, and the particular grief that comes when something disappears before it has been given a proper ending. What most of those fans did not know at the time was that the disappearance of the show was not even close to the strangest or most troubling part of this story. The strangest part was what had already been happening to the people in front of those cameras long before the show went quiet. The truth about what this cast endured is something the network never wanted discussed, and it starts with one name. What Jessica Chobot has been living through while the world was not paying attention will change the way you see everything about this series. Her story is next. Jessica Chobot built one of the most distinctive careers in entertainment by refusing to fit neatly into any single category the industry tried to place her in. She came up through gaming media at a time when women in that space were rare and rarely taken seriously, and she built her credibility through sheer force of intelligence, presence, and an authenticity that audiences recognized and responded to immediately. By the time she landed on Expedition X, she had already proven herself across multiple platforms and multiple formats, and her presence on the show sent a signal to viewers that this was a project worth investing in. She was not there to scream in dark hallways for the camera. She was not a prop placed beside the more traditionally adventurous elements of the production to give it a particular look. She was there because she was genuinely and deeply curious about the unknown and willing to go further than most people in her position would ever consider going in pursuit of answers that might actually mean something. What the audience saw on screen was real. The curiosity was real. The discomfort was real. The commitment to getting it right was real. But what was happening off screen behind the version of Jessica Chobot that viewers saw every episode was a different story entirely, one that has never been fully told. Behind the confident and composed exterior she brought to every investigation, Chobot was navigating a set of personal and professional pressures that would have broken most people working inside the same industry. The toll of years of high-demand paranormal production, the relentless international travel, the brutal physical conditions in locations that do not accommodate human comfort, the psychological weight of repeatedly placing yourself in situations specifically engineered to destabilize your perception of reality, is something that paranormal television has almost never been willing to acknowledge publicly. For Chobot, those pressures did not exist in isolation from each other. They were compounding across multiple seasons, building quietly on top of one another into something that could not be sustained at the pace the production demanded. People who followed her closely on social media began to notice small but telling changes over time. The energy shifted, the posts came less frequently. The interviews she gave carried a different quality behind her eyes than they had in earlier years. Fans who had been paying close attention started raising questions in comment sections that nobody in any official capacity was answering, and through all of it, through every sign that something was becoming unsustainable, Chobot kept showing up, kept delivering, and kept carrying a show that depended on her presence far more heavily than most viewers ever realized or would have guessed. That level of professionalism always has a price. The version of Jessica Chobot that existed in the later seasons of Expedition X was someone operating well past any reasonable limit, in service of a production that never adequately acknowledged what it was asking of her. What her situation actually looks like in 2026 is not what anyone watching her at her peak would have seen coming. Phil Torres is next, and his story is one that unfolded in almost complete silence. That silence is what makes it so devastating. Phil Torres brought something to Expedition X that the paranormal genre had almost never been able to produce before and has not been able to replicate since. His background in entomology gave him a scientific framework that the vast majority of investigators operating in this space simply do not possess. And he used that framework not to dismiss the unknown or to deflate the atmosphere the show was built around, but to approach every investigation with a genuine rigor that made its findings feel credible in a way that was genuinely rare. When Torres said something was worth investigating, it carried real weight because the audience understood that he was not saying it for dramatic effect. When he pushed back on a piece of evidence or raised a methodological concern, it was not a scripted moment of manufactured skepticism. It was the honest output of a trained scientific mind doing exactly what it was trained to do. That combination of genuine expertise and authentic curiosity was not incidental to what Expedition X was. It was foundational. He was the reason a viewer who might otherwise have dismissed the show as entertainment could find themselves taking it seriously. The show needed what Torres brought to it more than it ever fully communicated to the audience watching at home. And then the show ended, and Phil Torres, the man who had given the paranormal genre something it had never previously possessed, found himself navigating an industry that did not quite know how to value someone like him once the specific context that had made him visible disappeared. The trajectory of his career after Expedition X is not a story of dramatic failure or public collapse. It is something quieter and in many ways more troubling than that. It is the story of a genuinely talented and credentialed person finding that the television industry's interest in what he had to offer was shallower than the years he gave to it deserved. The projects that looked like opportunities revealed themselves to be less than they appeared. The doors that should have been open on the strength of his track record turned out to be considerably harder to push through than they had any right to be. He retreated from public view in stages that his longtime followers watched with a mixture of concern and frustration. Frustration not at Torres, but at a system that consistently fails to retain the people who bring it the most actual value. His social media presence, once engaged and active, became sparse. His name stopped appearing in lineups and announcements. The conversation moved forward without him in any meaningful role. What makes this story particularly difficult to sit with is how utterly preventable it feels. This was not a person who made enemies or squandered goodwill or ran out of things to contribute. This was someone who gave a genre genuine credibility and received diminishing returns on that investment until the machine moved on without acknowledgement or accountability. In 2026, the distance between where Phil Torres' career should be and where it actually is represents one of the quieter tragedies in the entire Expedition X story. Coming up, the decisions made behind closed doors that made all of this inevitable. While Jessica Chobot and Phil Torres were delivering their best work in front of the cameras, something very different was happening in the offices where the actual decisions about Expedition X got made. The story of what went wrong with this show is not only the story of what its cast experienced personally, it is also the story of an institution, a network that did not understand what it had, did not take adequate steps to protect it, and ultimately allowed it to deteriorate under the weight of priorities that had nothing to do with the quality of the content or the loyalty of the audience that had been built around it. Expedition X existed inside a television landscape that was changing faster than anyone in a position of authority seemed capable of adapting to in real time. The streaming wars had fundamentally altered what networks needed from their original content and how they evaluated whether a show was earning its place in the schedule. The economics of serious documentary production were being compressed from every direction simultaneously. Shows that required real international travel budgets, genuine and often difficult location access, and the kind of specialized expert personnel that Torres represented were becoming increasingly difficult to justify on spreadsheets that were being recalibrated to reward cheap production and guaranteed viral engagement over substance, craft, and the slow accumulation of a deeply loyal audience. The people making those spreadsheet decisions were not spending time in the comment sections where fans were declaring their commitment to the show. They were not reading the forums where viewers were dissecting every episode with genuine investment. They were looking at numbers in isolation and making projections that failed to account for the kind of long-building audience devotion that Expedition X had quietly earned season after season. The result of those projections was a series of decisions that the cast felt in their work before they understood what was causing the shift. Production timelines tightened without explanation. Resources that had previously been available were quietly reduced. Episodes that deserved the space and the budget to be executed properly were compressed into formats that could not contain what they were supposed to deliver. Investigations that warranted real follow-up were closed out before meaningful conclusions could be reached. The audience sensed the change, even without being able to name it precisely. The show that appeared in its later seasons carried a different texture than the one they had fallen in love with, not because the cast had stopped caring, but because the infrastructure behind them had been systematically reduced in ways they had no control over and no platform to address publicly. Through all of it, the network offered no transparency, no public acknowledgement, and no accountability to the audience that had made the show worth funding in the first place. The people who paid the price for those decisions were the ones whose faces were on camera, and for one of them, the price went well beyond professional frustration. That story is next. There is a conversation that paranormal television has never been willing to have in any sustained or honest way, and it is this one. The work is not safe, not physically, not psychologically, and not in any of the ways that matter most to the long-term well-being of the people who do it. The locations are real. The conditions in those locations are real. The sleep deprivation that comes with shooting in remote environments on tight production schedules is real. The psychological accumulation of repeatedly placing yourself in situations specifically engineered to destabilize your sense of reality and your relationship to the physical world is real, and it does not simply evaporate when the cameras stop rolling and the crew packs up and flies home. For the cast of Expedition X, that accumulation had a cost that the production never publicly acknowledged, and that the network had every institutional incentive to keep out of public conversation. Behind the polished episodes that aired, behind the investigations that made it through the editing process and onto the screen, there were human beings absorbing experiences that the majority of the people watching at home will never come close to in their lifetimes. Some of those experiences were remarkable in ways that justified every difficult moment that surrounded them, but others left marks that did not fade the way the production schedule assumed they would. Health challenges that developed during the course of the show's run were navigated privately because the culture of television production provides almost no structural space for vulnerability, especially from the people whose names are on the call sheet. Personal crises that landed directly on top of shooting schedules were managed quietly because the machine does not stop moving simply because one of the people inside it has reached or exceeded their limit. Viewers at home received a finished product that gave no indication of what it had cost to assemble. The professionalism of this cast was so thorough that the cracks were nearly impossible to see from the outside. Nearly. People who followed the cast closely, who paid attention to the signals that appear in interviews and social media, and the subtle changes in the way someone carries themselves on screen when something is wrong, began putting pieces together that the network would have strongly preferred to leave scattered. What was actually happening to members of this team during some of the show's most celebrated episodes is a story that has never been told completely or publicly. It involves the kind of experience that changes a person in ways that do not resolve cleanly and do not leave the person who lived through it the same on the other side. In 2026, the effects of what this cast absorbed during production remain visible for anyone paying the right kind of attention. The show ended. The network moved on. The cameras were packed away. The experiences those cameras captured stayed with the people who lived them. And the biggest story in this entire video is still directly ahead. Josh Gates is coming. But there is one more chapter inside the show itself that reframes everything that came before it. There is one investigation in the run of Expedition X that fans return to more consistently than any other. Not because it produced the most conclusive evidence, not because it generated the most dramatic footage or the most talked about moment in the show's history, but because in retrospect, knowing everything that has since become clear about the condition of the show and the state of the people making it, that episode takes on a meaning that nobody watching at the time could have anticipated or understood. It aired during what appeared on the surface to be one of the show's more stable and confident stretches. The production value was high. The location was genuinely compelling in the way that the best Expedition X episodes always were. Chobot and Torres were performing at a level that reminded even casual viewers exactly why they had connected with this show in the first place. What the audience watching at home did not know was that the people delivering that performance were doing so under conditions behind the scenes that had no business existing in the form they existed in. The tension that reads on screen as the natural intensity of a genuine investigation was absolutely real, but not entirely for the reasons that the editing constructed around it. There were unresolved conflicts happening during that production that never surfaced in any public way. There were decisions being made several layers above the investigators on the ground that directly shaped what they were able to pursue, what evidence they were permitted to present, and what version of the investigation the audience was ultimately going to see. There was a cut of that episode, a version of that investigation, that according to people with direct knowledge of the production told a substantially different story than the one that eventually aired. Fans who revisited that episode after the show ended started noticing details they had glossed over the first time. Moments where the energy between cast members carried a weight that the surrounding narrative could not fully account for. Exchanges that felt slightly compressed, slightly loaded, as though something was being held precisely at the surface without being allowed to break through. Those viewers were not wrong about what they were sensing. Something was being held back, not by the investigators themselves, who by all accounts wanted to show the audience everything they had found, but by a layer of production and network oversight that had its own reasons for the shape the final episode took. In 2026, that investigation still occupies a particular place in the memory of the show's most committed fans. Not as a triumph, and not as a failure either, but as a document of what the show was capable of producing even when the conditions surrounding it were working against it. The cast gave everything to that location. What they received in return was considerably less than what they had put in. That imbalance defined the final chapter of Expedition X more than anything else, and it led directly to what came next for the people who had carried it. When Expedition X went quiet, so did the people who made it. One by one, the social media accounts went dormant. Projects hinted at in interviews never materialized. Names that had been fixtures in the paranormal documentary world stopped appearing in lineups without explanation. Fans noticed every change, and they noticed it fast. Comment sections on archived episodes filled with questions nobody was answering. Reddit threads became places where devoted viewers pieced together fragments. A liked post here, a missing update there, trying to understand what had happened to a cast they had followed for years. In 2026, some have found new footing in adjacent spaces. Some are still searching for it, and some have gone so completely quiet that the silence itself has become the story. The full picture of where this cast landed has never been placed in front of the people who care most. Until this video, Josh Gates is next, and his story is what this entire video has been building toward. The final episodes of Expedition X aired without any acknowledgement that they were final. No conclusion was built with the awareness that a conclusion was coming. No moment existed where the show honored the audience that had given it years of loyalty with anything resembling a proper goodbye. It simply stopped. The silence deepened and became permanent without ever being officially declared. Fans organized petitions, flooded network inboxes, shared clips from favorite episodes like eulogies. None of it produced a real response. The network said nothing of substance. The show that spent its entire run chasing answers in the dark ended exactly the same way, without resolution and without the honesty its audience had earned. In 2026, that wound is still open, and nobody has felt the weight of it more personally or for longer than the man this video has been building toward from the start. Josh Gates is next. This is the part you came here for. Josh Gates is the closest thing the world of adventure documentary television has ever produced to a genuine and enduring icon. His career spans decades and encompasses hundreds of episodes across multiple franchises, and the identity he has built around his name represents something that almost nobody else in this genre has managed to sustain. A level of audience trust so deep and so durable that it has survived format changes, network transitions, platform shifts, and the relentless churn of an industry that creates and discards its personalities with a speed that leaves most of them unrecognizable within a few years of their peak. Gates built that trust slowly and deliberately, one expedition at a time, by consistently showing up to the most remote and difficult locations on Earth and treating the audience watching from home as genuine partners in the process of discovery rather than passive consumers of packaged spectacle. The relationship he built with the people who followed his work across franchises was not manufactured. It was earned over years of showing up and delivering. And it is the reason that what has been happening in his world in 2026 carries so much more weight than a similar story about almost anyone else operating in this space would. His connection to Expedition X, as a producer, as the institutional force behind the universe the show existed within, meant that when the show began to fracture, the effects of that fracture reached him in ways that the audience never fully saw. The status of Expedition Unknown, the flagship franchise that Gates has commanded for more than a decade, has entered a period of genuine uncertainty that his most devoted viewers have found deeply unsettling to witness from the outside. The questions surrounding its future, the network relationship that has defined the central chapter of his professional life, the format he has refined over years into something singular, do not resolve cleanly or quickly in 2026. Behind those professional uncertainties are personal dimensions that Gates has addressed only in the careful language of someone who has spent years learning to control what the camera is allowed to see. Reading between what he has said publicly, the picture that assembles itself is of a man who has given more to this genre than the genre has found ways to return, who is navigating a period of profound transition with the same determination he has brought to every expedition he has ever led, and who is doing so with considerably less institutional support than his body of work should have generated. The version of Josh Gates that exists in 2026 is not diminished. He is not finished, and he is not out of things to pursue, but he is in a chapter of his own story that is harder and more uncertain than anything his audience has watched him face on screen. And unlike every expedition he has ever documented, this one does not come with a production budget or a camera crew to bear witness to what it costs. He is navigating it the way all of us eventually must, without a guaranteed outcome, without a map, and without the ability to cut away when the moment becomes difficult to hold. The cast of Expedition X deserved better than the ending they received. The audience that loved this show deserved better than the silence that replaced it. If this video gave you the story nobody else was willing to tell, subscribe. There is always more.